Welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. Today, I am inspired to have, as I said in the little blurb we sent out yesterday, such an extraordinary guest to join me today on the Epiphany Show. And Toya and I go back, or Victoria, as she's known officially in her workplace. Victoria and I go back many, many moons, in actual fact, but her story is so inspiring. I knew we had to share it today, as you realize what has happened with her and where it's brought her. So first of all, to introduce a little bit about Toya or Victoria. Victoria is a dietitian. She's worked in Kenya as a dietitian very successfully in her own practice there. And then she and her husband moved over to Abu Dhabi, and she was working in the hospitals there as an official dietitian, very successfully presented talks, became an authority in her own right. And more recently, with two very small children, in fact, the second one was born after they moved through to Norway, where you can imagine from Africa to Abu Dhabi to Norway, and having to adapt to that climate, two small children, and reinvent herself with her dietitian practice. And Toya, I've watched Toya grow. I've watched her grow for many, many reasons, which will leave room for her to share with you. It's an amazing, amazing story. So Toya is going to be able to tell a little bit about what she does in that practice that is really quite different. But we're going to start off first. This comes with such a heartfelt, warm welcome, Victoria.
Thank you so much.
To have you with us.
Thank you.
And Toya, let's get going with, first of all, explain what it was that, I mean, we knew each other before, but what it was that brought you through to work the process. Just start with the initial story. What happened when you were a child?
So when I was a child, I lived a very traumatic event. I was 10 years old and I was living in Burundi, which is the country I grew up in. And it was a little paradise that suddenly turned into hell. And so the war started, and we were attacked by rebels. And my mother and my little sister got killed by my side. A few of us survived, but obviously that's something that stayed with me for many, many, many years. And so when I actually asked for help with Janet, I was to deal with that.
So Toya, before you came to get help, you didn't go from that traumatic event and just wander through life. I know you did quite a lot in between then and meeting up with me and doing the Epiphany side.
Yes, I did many, many years of therapy with a psychologist in Belgium, and I did a lot of energetic psychology. Basically, I wanted to, I had heard of the work of Netta. That's how it happened. I heard of what you were doing. We had a conversation. You had helped people with the Westgate attack. And I thought that your process was incredible, and I really wanted to see what it could do with me as well. So what happened is that I reached a stage where I relived the whole event one day, the whole event. And it was like I was going crazy, and it was terrible and traumatic again. My family didn't know what to do with me. The next day, I felt between life and death. And I thought I either continue living, or I don't want to live anymore because I can't deal with all these emotions that I'm feeling right now. And so that's how I said, well, I have two choices. I can contact my old psychologist, or I can try Janeta's process. And I decided to try Janeta's process, and I do not regret 1 second.
Okay, so let's back up a bit, because I know there more than likely will be a lot of people on the line right now, and people who will watch this in the future, where things like a traumatic event. For people who are joining us now, Toya was attacked by rebels whilst living in Burundi as a child, and her mother and baby sister were shot dead right next to her. It was a very traumatic event for her. So first
I
of
was
all,
shot at as well.
you were also, you had shrapnel injuries as well. That's very true. So over the years, you tried various therapies, and they were helping you to cope. It's not that you weren't coping, you were managing to get by with it. And then you had what you've just described, a whole day's full flashbacks happening.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, one day, yeah. The day
Yeah.
of my birthday, I think 23rd or 28th or 29th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And for those of you who might have been following me a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the flashback I had a couple of weeks ago. And when Toya talked to me about a flashback before, I understood it because I read it up. But having had a flashback for the first time in my life 2 months ago, where I thought I had covered just about everything that had happened when I lost Jen, my daughter, to suicide. And then one night I got into bed, and suddenly the moment I found Jenny hanging flashed in front of me as though it was happening there, that either I was there or it was happening here with me, and I could hardly breathe. And then I understood the PTSD flashback in actuality. It reads so differently. And it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. So that's when you stepped forward and decided you're not going to do conventional therapy. You're going to do transformational work, which is what, you know, the Epiphany process is not therapy. It's transformational work that provides the most amazing tools to do this sort of thing. But we'll talk about that some more. So what happened, I remember our very first session together as you worked it through. You booked a double session with me, and I mean, we moved mountains. So what happened in that first session?
What happened in that first session is I managed to make peace with what happened, and it was very much into an energetic level. It was working on a cognitive tool, but it had such a huge effect on an energetic level, if I may say, in a way. It's like I had lifted emotions, weight out of myself.
Absolutely. Because what the process does is it's a series of questions and answers that enable you to take what's been buried in the unconscious and safely bring it up. It's not traumatic at all. So it allows the ability to bring what was bothering you and you're most charged up about, and through a series of questions to bring that which was bothering you into a place of open-hearted, centered appreciation, acceptance, grace, and spontaneous love. And it happens in a nanosecond. Do you remember when you had that breakthrough? It was like shook, and you were going, oh, wow, this is amazing. This is so different. I didn't expect to feel like this.
No. Yeah, it was amazing. And it was definitely what you call an epiphany moment is, an aha moment. It was exactly like that. And it's as if, yeah, it's part of me, but there's no more all these emotions that were attached to it there anymore.
Yes, that's a very good point. When you've dealt with a loss or a trauma like that, it doesn't mean it goes away. It's there for the rest of your life. But what happens is you're in that place of manageability where you can understand that there are as many advantages as disadvantages to it happening. And it's not just done in the brain, it's not just logical thinking. The process enables any dissension between your brain and your emotions. Because so often people will logicalize in the light of day, going, yeah, but if you think, and it could have been, and it might have been, and should be thankful about this and that and the other. Even using those words are very judgmental, should be and got to be and have to be. And then, a little bit later, sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning, the emotions wake one up going, oh, no, but I don't feel like that. I can think like that, but I don't feel like that. And the process enables you on a conscious and an unconscious level to access both those thoughts that are in opposition to each other and thoughts and feelings, and start new conversations internally where thoughts and feelings are actually in a place of appreciation of each other instead of contradiction.
Yeah.
And it happens spontaneously. I have people after one session, like you did, who were, you texted me even before your next session saying, I've just had the most incredible conversation with somebody meaningful in my life that I never thought would be possible, because there's no distraction. It's the distraction between thoughts and emotions.
Yeah, I think it brings, you always talk about bringing like a heart opened place of manageability, and it feels really much like that. So instead of having your life experiences define your life and define your emotions and define the rage or the sadness that you can feel, and that impedes you to move forward or to go in the place that you want to go, the place that you wish to go, because you've lived those things and you're feeling it's unconscious and conscious at the same time. And with the process, it just brings it to a place of manageability and of feeling of peace, if I can say it in a way, of balance. It doesn't mean that what happened is diminished. It doesn't mean that I'm not remembering everything that happened and that it was totally a traumatic event, but it means that it's enabled me to be able to move forward with more manageability in my life, not letting those incidences define me, but more, it's like paying the success tax. It's like I've lived that. It's given me insights. It's giving me life skills and techniques and experiences and exposure. It's given me resilience, not looking only at what I have lost with it.
Exactly. I think the big thing is when we're in dissension between our thoughts and emotions, we easily run a list of all the losses. It runs deep. And then when you use the process, you start to spontaneously be able to run the counter list, which is equally as true. And I just realized my phone, because I wasn't expecting to use it, is very close to dying. So I might disappear quickly to go and plug it in, if you would just bear with me if that happens. Anyway, so that's what it enables you to do. So Toya, where did this lead you? Having well, first of all, how how many processes did you end up doing one-on-one in the beginning?
I can't remember.
Really
I ended up doing so many processes that I ended up studying and becoming an Epiphany consultant. I have zero regrets. It's a tool that I use daily in my life. The process is the most, it's a gift given in my life that I'm so grateful for. It's enabled me to deal with every difficult and challenging situation I face every day of my life. And like Janetta was saying, like, I've moved, I've become a mom, I was alone, every time I'm in the medical field, I have to get a new license. There's been so many hardships, and every time I've gone back to the process and gone through it and say, okay, like, what am I getting out of this? What is it allowing me to do that I'm not seeing that I can do? And it's just not, what it has happened is that all the hardships and all the challenges that I've been facing, they have not been an obstacle that was too hard to climb. It's been an opportunity every time to be able to grow and to get to where I want to get.
Excellent. So beautifully, beautifully put. And that's exactly it, is that it no longer makes one stumble. It becomes your most powerful tool when you have the correct questions and skills and tools to ask yourself, or the most powerful ones. And they're very powerful questions that the process provides for you. I was actually looking, you had 9 sessions initially with me for that trauma, and it was a huge trauma.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm finding, you know, people who are in a really, really bad state, stuck under bed sheets, hardly eating, maybe even self-harming and writing suicide notes. They're out of bed by about the 3rd session and gone by the 9th, 10th, 11th session, completely with the skills being able to be used by themselves, for themselves. And sometimes they use them unconsciously. They don't even know that they're using them, because it happens so spontaneously from the very first session. And that's where you were, and that's when you got invited, when I invited you to become a consultant and study the process. So in becoming and qualifying as an Epiphany consultant, what have you been able to powerfully do with this?
I've been, so because I'm a registered dietitian, it's actually something that inadvertently I always wanted to mix my consultation with the Epiphany process, but never really knew how to do it. And then I realized that actually inadvertently I was always doing it at different levels, because it is a process that you have to want to do. If you don't want to do it, if you don't want to get better, to happen is not going to work. You're going to get frustrated, and it's something that gets you to, like, it's not easy to do work on ourselves, and this process is definitely not an easy one. So I've used it in different ways and forms, but it's just been amazing. And actually, just to put a little comment with that, I was trying to fine tune like my niche as a dietitian, and what is it that I love doing and that I do, and it has to do with this process, because at the end of the day, I was looking at the testimonials and I was looking at comments of patients and clients of mine, and it was to change people's relationship with food. How powerful is that? But when you really think about it, everyone sees me for different ailments, for different diseases, for different reasons. And yet there's one thing that has always remained there. And it's through the process, but it's just that it's not done on a conscious level. I've managed to play with it in a way. That's why I call myself on Facebook, because I'm negotiating and I'm able to shift people's perceptions when I'm doing my consultations.
Yes.
And I've used it. In many ways.
In many ways, which was where I was going to take you. You've worked with people with eating disorders with this?
I've worked with people with eating disorders. I've worked with people with weight loss. I actually have to say a story that was really insightful, if I may. It was a patient of mine that has Crohn's disease. So Crohn's disease is an inflammatory bowel disease where you have all the bowel from mouth till the anus that can get inflamed, and in certain stages when the bowel is really inflamed, they can't eat anything, they can barely drink, they have to be hospitalized, and they have to be put on many medications, and it's really terrible. They have a lot of pain, they suffer a lot. When it goes really bad, some people have to have operations, and some parts of the bowel need to be removed. It's really not a fun place to be in. So I had a patient that came. He was doing much better, so he was out of the hospital, and he needed guidance towards his diet, because obviously any food that they eat, most foods that they eat actually makes them feel pain, and they don't digest it really well, and so it's very difficult to handle. And so I was helping this person deal with the nutrition part, and he was just so sad, and he was making himself such a big victim out of this situation, and he was not even wanting really to deal with his nutrition, because nothing was ever going to work, and this was the worst thing that had happened to him, and it was so terrible. And so I sat there and I said, listen, I have a process. I can maybe help you look at the other side of the coin. And so he said, fine. And I said, okay, so what has Crohn's disease done for you? And he sat there and he looked at me and he was completely shocked. And I said, if you hadn't gone and if you hadn't got this disease, what would have been different in your life?
Yeah, what wouldn't have worked?
And what wouldn't have worked?
Yeah.
And this is really hard to say to a patient, and he was of a culture that was not receptive of all of this. He turned his back, and then he turned back at me and he said, I have goosebumps. He said, it saved my life. He was severely obese before that. He couldn't walk 5 meters without humping and puffing. He was on a straight line to a deathbed.
Wow.
And then he got diagnosed with this. He lost more than 50 kilos. He started looking at his nutrition. He started looking at his hydration. He started running 5 kilometers daily. I never saw that person again. It was like heaven had come to him. He realized that that disease had actually saved his life, and he was so grateful for it.
Yeah. It's the most amazing, especially when they start and you start asking these questions. So for the people who've joined us more recently, a couple of you have just only joined us. Toya is a qualified Epiphany consultant. She qualified with me a few years ago now, and she uses it as a dietitian. So this is an example of somebody who could only see that having Crohn's disease was the worst thing that's ever happened in his life. But what happens with these questions, because of the very way they are structured and asked, they access your dissonance between your thoughts and your emotions. So they enable you to start answering in ways that peels away the stories. I've got a couple of clients and students online with us today, so they know what I'm talking about, which it enables you to peel away the story that's blocking and blinding. You know, that little blanket where you're going, I'm so lost because I have Crohn's disease, and it's ruined my life, and now I don't have a proper life with my family, and I don't have a proper relationship with my wife, and you can run that story from here until the cows come home. And it's not discounting that it's not true, because it is true.
It
But
is true.
it is true. And so it's never a case of going, oh no, your story is up to maggots, drop it. It really isn't that. It's about being able to peel that story aside and start asking these really incredibly powerful, structured questions that access your conscious consciousness and your unconscious consciousness to start remembering, because you actually know the other counter story. Helps you to start remembering what is working on different levels. And it's more than just, oh well, you know, I felt happier and more pleasant that time. It's more than that. It accesses it on such subtle levels that the more subtle the questions and answers become, the bigger the aha for the person. I mean, I've had people go, oh my word, I never ever thought or felt about it that way. I never thought to feel that way, or to look at it that way, or to understand it that way, because it's an understanding that's almost beyond being able to explain, beyond explanation.
Right, and it's incredibly empowering.
It is.
What I feel is that most of these situations, most of these situations take your power from you. You feel you don't have power anymore. You can't do anything about it. It's like it's fatality. And what it does, it empowers you. It empowers you to be able to be at peace with it, and to be in balance with it, and just like move forward and actually do things with it.
Exactly. We've just had George come online. George is just about to qualify as an Epiphany specialist, and he's sitting, by way of example, in Barcelona, not able to speak very much Spanish. You could help him, Toya.
Yep.
Not much Spanish, in isolation on his own. And we were busy making notes of what would not have worked if he hadn't had this process, and what he's been able to do because of this process in that isolation with no friends, because he'd only recently come to Spain when all this happened. So he's not got a network of friends to support him there. Nothing, complete isolation for weeks and weeks in Barcelona. He's just come online now. And in fact, he's somebody we're going to be interviewing very soon as well. So George, welcome. So Toya, at the end of the day, you've been able to use this process in all areas of your life, from birthing children. Where has it affected you that you've done more powerful things than if you didn't have it?
In my relationship, has done amazing things. We actually even did a process before getting married, and we had been dating for not very long, and it was very powerful because we were in the fantasy land at that time, and there was no negative that we could put into each other. But I remember Janetta saying, you have to find 3 things that you despise of each other, and these 3 things are going to carry with you for life. And you know what? She was so true. She was so right. It's things that I still laugh about, because I'm like, my God.
I'm so glad you brought it up, because what happens in a new relationship is you marginalize what you don't like about the relationship, and you maximize everything that's fabulous. And then what happens after a while is the pendulum goes that way, and now suddenly all you can see is what you dislike, and what you like gets marginalized. So what the process enables you to do is to bring both into a place of open-hearted manageability, so that whatever you dislike about the person, you can equally understand how valuable it is that they're like that, and how whatever you're enamored with that person, you can equally see where it's not serving you. So
Right.
that whichever they are, you can see equal amount of disadvantage and advantage. So there's a balance going on. You're not weighted on having to be living with that person in one way, or in the
Right.
way you are
I
in
think
fantasy about.
I think where it's helped me the most, if I can just really put it concise, is where my big life values sit. And so my big life values is my family and my vocation. And they've always been very near each other. And that's where I've probably used, well, I haven't probably, I've used the tool the most, definitely.
Yeah. And it's where my values sit between my family and my work. And it's always been a juggle. And it used to be a conflict where before I had this process. And now it is the most empowering thing. I have my family involved in what I do so much of the time, because I'm able to talk about things in their value system, because I have this process to peel away distraction of what I'm feeling and thinking in extreme, and bring really real, authentic conversations with my family through this. And that's what I hear you and Marco doing often, where you've been able to step forward with new, powerful conversations, your children, juggle your work and this. So,
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that having the process make things easier. It's not at all like that. I have to say hi, Dimitrios. I saw that you joined, so that was my manager at Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi. That's actually something that is really big, because in Abu Dhabi, and he gave me the chance, I got my dream job. And I got my dream job, but on the other hand, there was things at home that were going on, and so it was very difficult to manage both. And I'm very passionate in what I do, so I was very dedicated in both my family, in my job. And I did a session with you for 6 hours where I had to decide, like, one had to give, because I just couldn't give to both of it anymore. I needed some balance. I needed to give something. Sometimes something needs to give in life. And the process helped me make a decision. It didn't mean that I was 100% at peace. I actually became at peace with it here in Norway.
yeah.
So this is years after, because
Yes.
I regret it so much, because there was parts of me that were so unhappy that I had left that job. That was my dream job. That was for me. That was what I wanted all my life. And I was given that opportunity, and I was given responsibilities, and I was thriving. And I had to give that away, because I had to give more to my family as well. And I realized that with the process, I was able to bring it to a manageability, but there was still a lot of resentment. And then here in Norway, I was still feeling that resentment pulling. Until one day I was like, okay, enough. I need to go and through the process. And why did I really do it? What did I gain out of it? And it was invaluable, because giving time to my son, that at that time was really sick, had no value. Why would I not give him the time? I don't have value to give to that. I can work any time of my life. And one thing I knew is that it doesn't matter, a setting doesn't define what I'm going to do. And actually being outside of an entity sometimes gives more freedom of being able to work in the way that we want to work. So it's been incredible to be able to work with the process. And on the other hand, it doesn't mean that because you have the process, things just happen always like that. They carry on with you. And sometimes, like you said, like it's a flashback, it comes back. But when you have the tools,
Exactly.
That's when you can like take care of it.
That's exactly it. I call it mental and emotional daily gym. We understand how important it is to work out our bodies, but nobody's told us how equally important it is to work out our thoughts and our, that the three complement each other. They're interactive with each other, and you really authentically step into your power when you do work this out. So it's not about eliminating challenges or eliminating troubles. They're part of life. It's being able to understand their value, but on more than a reasoning level, on a deep level, down to the very seat of your being, really authentically being able to say, I get it, and using it time and time again. And some things do take longer than others. I mean, I had one incident that happened to me as a child when I was 7 years old. Soon I will be sharing it, not quite yet. And that took me a much longer time than the more other weightier things I was dealing with. So there's no time limit on this. It's just knowing you've got the skills. I had a client who's on today asking me this morning, and I was saying it's about understanding that you've learned to ride a bicycle, or you've learned to read and write, even within a handful of sessions, one handful of sessions, less than a handful. You've learned that. But the secret is to take it and really become skilled at it. So you become a skilled bicycle rider or a skilled writer. You can't unlearn it. Once you've learned this process, it's there. It's just the most wonderful thing to have with you. But expanding it more and more, as you have and other Epiphany students have, is just so inspiring for me. I just, it's like, wow. And that's where, in my greatest loss in losing a child to suicide, being able to step forward authentically with this and use it so powerfully, and be able to show that there's so much meaning in challenge, but not just in the logical brain. When you can marry it all up, it makes a huge difference. So to end off, Toya, if anybody would like to chat to you online, because you're now working internationally online, about their diets, how would they get hold of you?
They can get hold of me on the Diet Broker page. And then soon there's going to be my website, which is going to be thedietbroker.com. And on Instagram as well. So I'm the Diet Broker on Instagram as well.
This is wonderful. Thanks, Toya. And for anybody who wants to know more,
and
about
if I wanted to say something.
Go on.
So this morning I was listening to a podcast with Lewis House and Bob Proctor, and he mentioned a saying of Michael Beckwith that really resonated with me, and how I feel the process, like it's as if the process talked. He says, when anything happens in your life, there is a 3 steps approach to it. Whatever happens, accept it. It doesn't matter. Whatever happens, whatever is your situation, just accept it. Then he says the second thing is to harvest the good. Harvest the good of your hardship. Harvest the good of your goodship. Harvest the good. And the third thing he said is forgive all the rest. And I felt that was a good insight on how the Epiphany process works, because it makes you accept, it makes you forgive, it makes you harvest the good out of the bad.
Yeah, it does. And it doesn't do it on just a logical level. It does it on all levels, as we were saying. And to go one step further, forgiveness is an interesting one, because when you're forgiving, there's still judgment there. You know, you did this, but I will forgive. Or this happened, but I will forgive that it happened. So there's still judgment there. When you really process on a conscious and an unconscious level, you're able to acknowledge that what happened, and that maybe the person or the people need to be called out. So that's not discounted. But what you're able to do is to accept that it's happened and be able to appreciate equally what it's done for you, so that you can powerfully step forward and talk to the people from a place of mental and emotional balance. It's heart opening. So powerful words, you don't have the distraction of judgment or fear. Powerful words just come out. I have clients phone me saying, I can't believe these words came out my mouth. It was like, wow, where did that pearl of wisdom come from? And that's the difference between forgiveness and complete acceptance. So beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Toria, thank you for your sharing where we can get hold of you. If anybody would like to directly know more about how to expand their abilities with this process, please do feel free to chat to me. I have the ability to give you a space and a place to book. And our next interview is with Sadia Ibrahim from Nairobi. It's been pre-recorded for various reasons. And Sadia was a victim of the Westgate terrorist attack. And she was with me within minutes of getting out of Westgate, processing. She was already a client of mine. So I look forward to having you at that interview too, because what she has to share is equally as inspiring in a different way. Toya, just such an honor to have you here today and to have you as part of the Epiphany team. I thank you and I love you, and we both send lots and lots of love to everybody out there watching today and anybody watching in the future. Speak to you soon.
Thank you so much.